Hello and welcome back. So now we're going to start building our new recipe functionality from the web. Okay, we already have the form. It looks like this. We can enter in the name, description, and the button to create new recipe, but obviously it doesn't send this anywhere. So let's build out what this entire functionality would look like. It would look like this. We would get this new page, which we already have in our get new recipe path test. And then you fill in the name, you fill in description, and you hit create recipe, and then it should create recipe. You should get a message that says recipe has been created, and that should be the workflow. And if you have any errors, then it should list out the errors over here, say what they are, so you can fix them and submit them again. Okay, so that is what we're going to be doing over here. So first we're going to work on this reject invalid recipe submissions test. So get new recipe path, fine. Assert template, recipes new. That's good also because we have this new form and new template. Okay. Then how are we going to see that a recipe has not been created? How are we going to test that? So when a new recipe is successfully created, it's going to hit the database, right? So there's going to be an increase in the recipe count. When a recipe is rejected, it's not going to hit the database. There's going to be no change in the count of recipes in the database, right? So we're going to do this. Assert no difference. Okay, this is another assertion available. Again, if you want to look up assertions, you can literally type in Rails assertions, and then a guide to testing Rails application shows up. If you scroll down, there you go. A lot of the assertions and what they do. Okay, so you can reference this at any time. I'm going to close that out. Okay, back here, assert no difference. And this is going to be recipe count. Okay, so recipe, my class dot count do. This is going to be a block. I'm going to try to post to the recipes path. So post, meaning I'm going to submit this form, but with no information filled in for name and description. All right, so then it should fail. So post to recipes path params colon open close curly brace, and within it it's going to be of type recipe, right? And then open close curly brace again. Name is going to be empty, and then description is going to be empty as well. Close quotes, close the two curly braces, and then end. Okay, end the do block. So after I post to recipes path, the top level key of recipe, so it's going to be type recipe, and then a name nothing, description nothing, it should reject, meaning there should be no difference in my recipe count. Okay, and then I should get back the new recipe page again. So assert template recipes new, meaning I should get this new form again with the errors listed. And the errors, without knowing specifically what they're going to be, I'm simply going to look for a couple of things that I'll expect in the styling of my errors. So assert, select, I'm going to have a h2 tag, and then panel dash title. That's where I'm going to say that this has errors, and then assert select div panel body. That's where I'm going to have the actual errors listed. So if these two show up in my output of the page, okay, that means there were errors being displayed. So the new form is going to show up with these two in the page. Okay, so I'm going to try to post to recipes path a recipe with no name and no description, and it should fail. Simple. Save that. Let's try it out. Rails test. Okay, we have errors. What does it say? No route matches for post. Okay, so let's build a route. So let's pull up our routes file over here. Now this is where I'm going to stop building this out one by one. Okay, you get the idea of what this used to look like, and I wanted to show you what this used to look like. So this would be something like this. This would be post to slash recipes. Okay, and then this I would send to colon recipes controller, and then create action. Remember, new form gets submitted to create, and that's it. Okay, this would be what the route would look like. Now if I type in Rails test, I get another error, and the error says the action create could not be found. So now it has the route, it just can't find the create action in the recipes controller. All right, now I am no longer going to build this out like this. I can simply get all of my routes and couple more, which is the edit, update, and delete route, by simply doing resources recipes. Okay, save that. Now if I type in Rails test again, you'll see I get the same error. Everything else is still working. Okay, all my other tests are still passing, which means I have all of the existing routes. Now if you see over here, if I type in Rails routes grep recipe, you see I have my post for my create action, and I have some additional routes as well, which we'll work on next. Great. So my error right now is my create action is missing. So let's go ahead and create the create action in my recipes controller over here. Define create end. Now if you remember from the to-dos app, let's take a quick look at the to-do app just to get a quick reminder. Under controller, to-dos controller, this is the standard form of what a create action looks like. You first create a new to-do object, okay, with the params that are sent in, meaning with the information that are sent in from the web through the URL params hash. Then you try to save that to-do object. First of all, of course, the params you whitelist through the private params method, where you're gonna use strong parameters to whitelist what you can accept. And then you try to save that. If it saves, you send a friendly message saying it was successfully created, and then redirect to a specific path that you have, that you want to. Else, you render the new template again and it shows up with errors. Okay, so that's what we're going to do right now. Over here, define create. We're going to create @recipe instance variable equals recipe.new, and then we're going to call this recipe params for whitelisting. Okay, which means we have to have a private recipe params method. Define recipe underscore params. Params.require, top level key is going to be recipe dot permit. We're going to accept recipe name and description, which are the two attributes here, name and description. So colon name, colon description. So there you go. That should take care of whitelisting what we're passing in. Now, one thing you have to remember is we are enforcing a requirement for a user. Remember, a recipe has to have a user associated with it. And we don't have authentication or users created yet. Okay, so we have no way of automatically assigning the user from basically the logged in user. So at this time, what I'll do is @recipe.chef, actually not user, equals chef.first, meaning the first chef I can find in my database, I'll assign to the recipe as the creator. At this time, once we work on chefs, which are our users for the application, and finish that section, we will change this and we will make this whoever is the logged in user who's creating the recipe, we're going to assign that user. Okay, but for now, first. Now for this code to work, you need to have a user in your database or a chef defined. So hop on Rails console and type in chef.first. And make sure you have a chef defined. If you don't have a chef defined, then go ahead and create a chef at this time, okay? And you know how to do that. Chef equals chef.create, and then put in a name and email in this, and then save the chef, okay? Actually, if you use create, then it's gonna save it automatically if you have no errors. So I'm gonna exit out. Make sure you do that. Make sure you have a chef defined. Otherwise, this code, chef.first, will not work. All right. Okay, now it's gonna be an attempt to save the recipe, right? So if at recipe.save, then something, else, meaning it fails, we want to render the new template again. So render within quotes new, end. So if something else, render new, end, meaning failure, render the new template again, and end. Now, if it saves, what do we want to do? We want to do a flash message. It's going to be of type success, and we're going to say recipe was created successfully. Okay? And then we want to redirect to recipe path at recipe. Now, if you remember, this recipe path at recipe simply is the recipe show page. So first is going to show this message saying it was successfully created, and it's going to show that in the recipe path, meaning the recipe show page. So let's see if this works. Let's see what happens when we run our Rails test. Okay, what does it say? Reject invalid recipe submissions. Okay, expected at least one element matching this, found 0, meaning now it's gotten to this part of the test. So assert template recipes new worked, assert no difference in recipe count worked. Both of these worked. Then it went to recipes new, it showed that also. Then it couldn't find these two, h2 panel title and div panel body. It couldn't find these two, meaning my errors are not showing up. So we need a way to show my errors. So in my new form, on top here, right after I show the page title, I have to display the errors, because if you remember, if I have any errors, they're going to be associated with my @recipe object. Okay? So how do we do this? If my recipe has any errors, display it. Okay? That's how we do this. So embedded Ruby, if at recipe.errors.any question mark, and then close the block. Okay, so if recipe errors any, then we want to display it. Okay, so what we're going to do is simply embedded Ruby equals, we're going to use this method pluralize, and within parentheses we're going to say at recipe.errors.count. So what pluralize will do is, if it is one error, it's going to say one error. Okay, if it is 5 errors, it's going to say errors, 5 errors. Okay, that's what this pluralize method does. And the word that I wanted to pluralize is error. So comma error. So 1 error, error, 5 errors or 2 errors, errors. That's what's going to show up. Close embedded Ruby. Prohibited this embedded Ruby equals at recipe.class. Now I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. I can say this. So prohibited this recipe from being saved, but what if I want to use this error somewhere else? What if I want to turn this into a partial, this error partial somewhere else? Then I can simply do this. Embedded Ruby equals at recipe.class. This way it will say recipe, okay? But if I use it somewhere else, let's say I'm using it for user, it'll say user. Or chef, it'll say chef. Prohibited this chef, okay? So in this place, I can simply say embedded Ruby at recipe.class from being saved. And then a colon, And then I want to run through all the errors and display them. So embedded Ruby at recipe.errors full underscore messages each do within pipes. I'm going to say message, then close this tag, close this do block actually. And what do we want to display? We simply want to display the message. Okay, so embedded Ruby equals message. All right, now obviously there's no styling here and this is not going to look well at all. So let's start with adding some styling. All right, we're gonna first start with this one. Over here, I'm going to have an unordered list. Okay, Command X. After this, Command V. And then as I loop through each one, I want this to be a list item. Command X. Command V. Okay. All right, now is my test going to pass now? No, because I'm still missing this H2 panel title, okay, which is my bootstrap expectation that I've put in for my error section. Now, if you're wondering, is this actually going to work? Let's try it out, okay? Let's try it out. Let's save this over here. Let me try to submit this, okay? Leave it empty, leave description empty, create recipe. Check this out. It's working. I have my errors showing up, but obviously there's no styling. So now let's add styling to this. And we're going to do that in the next video. See you there.